Hey guys, before we start, I just wanted to thank each and every one of you for the kind comments on my Let's Talk video. They really did make my day, and I appreciate each and every one of you for the amazing support we've had for the last 9 years. I will be taking your advice though, and will be taking a break sometime in July. I will keep you all posted for when I do that. As far as June goes, however, I will be going back to 3 vids a week and not 4. I at least want to get through the month strong. Anyways, thanks for your time, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Well, we've talked about the worst Pokemon of every type, and we've also talked about more Pokemon you should use in Scarlet and Violet, along with various other topics regarding this game. Now, with the home update officially coming out, and some time having passed, I'm ready to talk about the underrated Pokemon of every type for this game. I don't know how much from home will be on this list, because there's a lot of crazy stuff from there that definitely is not underrated by any means. Regieleku's base 200 speed stat let its speedrun getting banned from singles, and I find that to be comical. Magearna, Chien-Pao, and Zamazenta Crowned had it coming from the start. Now, I've already explained how I decide what's underrated and what isn't, along with the fact that this is all personal opinion. So I won't waste too much time going over it again, since I want to get straight to talking about the 18 creatures on this list. Honestly, Vivillon comes to mind as a bug type that feels underappreciated. I'm not trying to say it's some competitive mainstay, as if I'm trying to hype up a low-tier Quiver Dancer for battle. I'm going with the resistance, ignoring Venomoth. I'm saying Vivillon is underrated here because of the fact that all the patterns look pretty neat and nobody talks about them. So I'm gonna talk about them. The regular form of Vivillon is the most basic, and it has that solid pink. I really like it. The Pokeball pattern is exactly what it says, and I think it's cool. Although it makes me wonder if the Pokeball pattern has always existed before the invention of the Pokeball, or if it adapted to look more like a Pokeball once we invented them. Great. This is Fungus and Amoonguss all over again. The fancy form did something I didn't think could be done, and that's make pink and green go together. Impressive. Exquisite even. I don't really know how to get my hands on one of these, and honestly, I think I'll look it up after I'm done with this video. Kinda want one on my team. Not really a waste of a team slot when you have Compound Eyes to boost your Sleep Powder accuracy. And then also having access to Quiver Dance, Bug Buzz, and Hurricane gives you some pretty crazy damage. I know it isn't bad, and it's seen some use in VGC and in lower tier singles, but I can't help but feel bad for Brute Bonnet. It isn't Amoonguss, and because all the Paradox Pokemon are locked to one of 2 abilities, it can't ever have Regenerator. And despite the fact that you're clearly supposed to play in the sun due to photosynthesis, they didn't think to give it Solar Blade. Where would the blade come from? I'm not particularly sure. But what matters is that it doesn't have it. Not having it means it's locked to either Seed Bomb or Bullet Seed. Yeah, loaded dice is nice, but I'd rather have that consistent base 125 power Grass Stab for my base 127 attack. But it isn't all bad. Spore is an excellent move, even if no matter how hard you try, you'll never be able to get a speed boost from photosynthesis. And access to Sucker Punch, Close Combat, Taunt, Trailblaze, and Stomping Tantrum are all solid tools. It's even possible to use it in the sun by setting up a growth, almost like a budget Swords Dance, and then hitting Sucker Punch. Just pretend Kingambit can't do the same thing but easier just by clicking Swords Dance. Altaria is a menace. I've talked about it before and how it uses Will-O-Wisp and Roost to whittle down the opposition, and Natural Cure lets it never have to truly worry about getting hit by a status move. But I'd also like to mention that its last 2 moves can really just be anything you want. My favorite thing to do with the last 2 move slots is be counterproductive and use Dragon Dance and Brave Bird. Look, Roost can offset recoil, and sometimes after enough setup, I want to be able to hit the big damage button. It does get Earthquake though, if that's more your speed. Bulky offensive Dragon Dance isn't something that's viable very often, with the last good example off the top of my head being Tyranitar, although Baxcalibur isn't really frail either. Altaria can basically be a low tier version of that. Now, outside of the lower tiers, does it have too much competitive merit? Sadly not. However, what it does have is a beautiful singing voice, a pattable head, and pettable soft clouds to compensate. It's no Dragonite or Garchomp, but it's a friend. Man, poor Pinkerton. All it needed was Volt Switch, and it would actually be a really solid Pokemon. It already has everything else it needs. It's got okayish bulk, it's super slow so it can take a hit and then Volt Switch, it's got Recover so that way it can heal up, Spikes and Toxic Spikes are amazing setup options, and yeah, Memento could let it pivot and also lower the opposition's attack stats, all while holding the terrain extender. But it can only do that once. A true terrain setter is typically able to come back in, which Volt Switch would let it do without much hassle. Sadly, it doesn't have Volt Switch, and so it can't be the true mini Miraidon that Iron Valiant and his friends need to keep up with Torkoal, Roaring Moon, and its gang of powerful sun abusers. It doesn't help that they took Rising Voltage away from it either, which just felt unnecessary, and Alolan Raichu also doesn't have it, which means it can't be the Surge Surf Sweeper that it's destined to be. Now, don't get me wrong, I think that Pinkerton can still be a great support for an Iron Paradox, using Memento to lower something's offensive capabilities, and then going into Iron Valiant to try to sweep, or Iron Hands to set up and take hits, all while threatening massive damage in return is incredibly potent. There is potential here, it's just incredibly hard to make work in the high power competitive environment. Klefki is a Steel and Fairy type, has Prankster Screens, Thunder Wave, access to Spikes, Foul Play, and maybe even a Calm Mind, Iron Defense, and Draining Kiss set as a means to be Magearna on a budget. And yet, it still isn't considered that good. It currently rests in RU for competitive singles. Now, I'm not gonna act like I'm surprised, as there's not a single Steel and Fairy type in OU, given that Magearna showed us why we aren't allowed to have a Steel and Fairy type with a good stat distribution. If Klefki and Tinkaton had better stats, they'd probably be up there in OU. However, I don't think Klefki is necessarily bad in the higher tiers, as much as it is more difficult to make use of given its competition. But a proper team that can fit it on there is absolutely going to make good use of it. Klefki's got a near perfect arsenal, only missing a good pivot move like Grimmsnarl's Parting Shot. But even with its admittedly mediocre set of stats, I still don't want to see it in team preview, because I know that whoever is piloting Klefki is brewing something sinister. I'm either seeing double screens into like Terra Normal Dragonite, or I'm seeing spikes get set up to weaken my team, and then Terra Normal Dragonite. So, fighting types. Can we just take a moment to not appreciate the fact that certain Pokemon got left behind in the home update? I'm not saying it would have been a competitive superstar or anything, but Infernape got done dirty. Although Empoleon is probably praising Arceus for not letting it be in a meta with Salt Cure, given that it would be taking half damage every turn from the big Salt Rock. But I can't help but wonder where Infernape is. Well, at least we have Firebreed Tauros. I've already covered Firebreed Tauros before, so I'm not gonna retread old points too hard. But I think it's definitely the coolest of the 3 Paldean Tauros forms. And the Intimidate Will-O-Wisp Body Press set will never fail to be at least somewhat competent. It's no Fire Monkey that reminds me of Vegeta, but it's there to fill the fire and fighting void left in my heart. Now, speaking of fire types, can we take a moment to... No, wait a second. This is just gonna be me talking about Infernape again. So you know what? Enough time has passed. Where's the love for Pyroar? Pyroar has been here for 10 years. Other than 2 boss fights in Kalos off the top of my head, I don't remember it doing anything important. Then again, I can't fault people for not seeing the merits in a special attacker whose hidden ability happens to raise its physical attack upon scoring a KO. They also made sure it had all the physical coverage it needed in Wild Charge, Trailblaze, Acrobatics, Psychic Fangs, and Flare Blitz, all coming off of a 68 base attack. And for its 109 special attack, we get Terra Blast, any fire move, Dark Pulse, Solar Beam if you're feeling yourself, and then Terra Blast again, but potentially a different type. Well, at least Terra Blast is always Stab, which is the single only meaningful buff they've ever given it. I think it has solid enough stats to be an okay special attacker, but the lack of special coverage and how frail it is makes it a bit more fringe. Now, why do I think it's underrated? Well, Choice Specs Terra Blast coming off any Terra you want is always a good option so long as you're faster than your opponent. Bring it to a PU match and go off. I'll always be a fan of the power to have 3 stabs without needing to terrestrialize, so Bombirdier does it for me in a way that only Delmice can replicate. Rocky Payload boosts its Stone Edges and Rock Blast, Brave Bird is always a fun option to have, and it has access to the now limited Knockoff. U-Turn as a pivot option also further bolsters its offensive capabilities, because now it can switch out while doing damage, or you can use Parting Shot to lower the opponent's offenses and get into another offensive Pokemon without much issue. Or the secret 4th option, Terra Ground Drill Run to rid the world of Jolteon or Magneton that thought it could come in and kill your bird. And now you have not 1, 2, or 3, but 4 whole stabs. And to think it's coming off a rather okay 103 attack stat. Joke answers aside, I just think that Bombirdier has a lot of potential and can practically do whatever it wants. It has 2 forms of pivoting, access to various offensive tools, Stealth Rock, Taunt, Roost, Whirlwind, and Tailwind. While it's mostly held back by its base 83 stat, the ability to mix and match your Bombirdier's moves to your liking, depending on the type of team you're building, makes it worth the team slot a decent bit of the time. You know what? I think maybe Froslass is better than I thought. Yeah, there is the Spike stacking lead who uses Destiny Bond on a slower opponent and goes 1-for-1 with Spikes up as a means of getting an advantage. And that is pretty good. But I'm mostly referring to the idea that it has some really cool, albeit mortifying lore. It's a woman who died on a cold mountain and became a Pokemon who eats souls, freezes people and Pokemon it likes, makes them decorations in its evil lair, and goes after handsome men. You see, that last part is terrifying for me for obvious reasons, as I like having my soul as a professional handsome man. These stories send a chill down my spine when I think about them, and it's why I refuse to answer the door during a blizzard, because I know who's on the other side waiting for me. Sadly, it doesn't have the offensive stats to back this up, only having base 80 on its offenses and 70 on all of its defensive stats. They couldn't make it too much better than Glalie now, could they? I've always taken personal offense to the fact that Lurantis lost superpower and didn't get close combat in return the same way Scizor did. While this sentiment also applies to Rillaboom, who lost superpower and Grassy Glide with no compensation, Lurantis honestly has it worse overall, because Rillaboom gets to set terrain and it has other options left over. Lurantis has basically nothing. Well, nothing except for one remaining trait that we may as well put to good use while Superior isn't around. This is the Contrary in Leaf Storm Pokemon. No one else can make use of that combination. Leaf Storm isn't even its only special attack either. Pollen Puff, Giga Drain, and Terra Blast are solid options, and you even get access to a minute twinge of utility in the form of Defog. Of course, there's also switching in to someone else's Defog as a Contrary Lurantis and getting an evasion boost. Dodging attacks while spamming Leaf Storm to acquire power is something very unique to it in this day and age. Its biggest issue is that it's slow, but a well-played Lurantis is worth using, at least in lower tiers. I'd recommend either using Leftovers or an Assault Vest on special attacking variants, and Choice Band on physical ones. Can you imagine if Toedscruel had any other ability? It would theoretically be one of the dumbest Pokemon to ever live. Base 100 Speed and Spore is a dangerous combo that no living mortal should have access to, and Game Freak knew that. And that's why they give it Mycelium Might to make sure that if it even thinks about using Spore even once, it goes last. Sadly, this doesn't just apply to Spore. No. This applies to all status moves. This means that it can't even use Synthesis without... Wait. It can't even get Synthesis? Well, that's kind of dumb. Well, nothing much we can do about that, aside from looking at the upsides to Toedscruel. It's got the Tentacruel stat distribution, which has always been at least solid, and Mycelium Might at least lets it ignore abilities. Are you tired of Garganacl and Goldango standing in your way with their broken abilities? Well, good news. All you have to do is take a hit, and then bam, they're out like a light. And then you can threaten stuff with the likes of Knockoff, Giga Drain, Earth Power, Dazzling Gleam, or Flash Cannon. It's a fine Pokemon, It may just need to be a little less weak to ice though. Man, poor Beartic. I was always fond of attempting to use him on really scuffed rain teams in the lower tiers, where I'd have 3 Rain Dance setters, and then a Terra Water Liquidation to complement its access to Swift Swim. Heavy duty boots would let it come in on rocks pre-Terra, and once it Terra Watered, it could live a hit and get up a Swords Dance before spamming Liquidation on the opponent. We then had Aqua Jet for priority, Close Combat for coverage, and Icicle Crash for when I liked conveniently missing my Ice Stab when it mattered most. Gimmicky rain teams sadly don't work very well without an actual drizzle Pokemon. Now, why not use it on hail teams? It does have a 130 base attack stat, and surely Slush Rush is good for it. And you'd be right. However, people have liked to use Cetitan more for that role, because despite the lower attack stat of 113, it has higher speed and more overall bulk thanks to that 170 HP stat, plus access to the not missing Ice Spinner. I still like to believe there's a place for Beartic on hail teams alongside or in the slot of Cetitan, because it has the literal attack stat of Garchomp and access to Swords Dance. It wins harder than Cetitan does, but sadly, Cetitan is more consistent. Give it a shot when you have the time though, because it's not the worst weather sweeper you can get your hands on. I'm willing to make a rather bold take and say that Meloetta really isn't all that bad. Now, for those who don't know, Meloetta is an OU. Yes, it is. But no one uses it, and it'll probably drop to UU pretty soon because stats in Smogon competitive singles are based off of usage. I don't think it'll be an OU for very long, and that's not right shame. But why it's like this is pretty self-explanatory. The Pirouette form is the good one, and the good one is locked behind Relic Song. And if you use Relic Song on a presumably jolly, if not naive physical attacker, that's essentially a wasted turn. In order to access the power of that supreme base 128 attack in speed, you gotta use a special attack. Yeah, base Meloetta has a base 128 special attack, so it'll at least do some damage for you. And thanks to Serene Grace, there's a 20% chance to put the target to sleep. However, this isn't preferred when starting in Pirouette would just be better for it, because Relic Song being forced onto your move pool means that you only get 3 moves to play the fun physical variant with. You lose a coverage option. On the bright side, Terra Blast is still always stab even if you don't Terra, and then Close Combat and Ice Punch can get the job done. Wasting a turn is just rough in a metagame where a turn can decide the course of a whole match. Also, you can't use a choice item, because if you do, you're locked into one move. And that move will be Relic Song, so you'll just be switching back and forth. I think Meloetta in this limited dex can still be very good with Relic Song and 3 physical attacks. I just think it's going to be hard to justify it, because one wrong move when trying to get into Pirouette form, and it's curtains. But you know what? That doesn't make it bad. And now, I want to try it for myself. Remember earlier when I said that if I'm gonna hype up a Quiver Dancer, I'm gonna go with Venomoth? Anyways, yeah, I'm gonna hype up Venomoth. Tinted Lens is a pretty ridiculous ability, and Venomoth has just good enough stats to be able to go off after a Quiver Dance or 2. It's also got access to Morning Sun now to heal, so you really only need your 2 stabs, Quiver Dance and Morning Sun, to act as a true budget Volcarona, equipped with the ability to Bug Buzz through just about anything in the RU tier. Now, why is it only NUBL and not RU then? Because some good Pokemon are in RU. Competition is stiff up there. But we've seen Pokemon rise up through usage to the next tier. And so, there's gotta be a niche out there in RU that Venomoth is just waiting to take advantage of. Also, we get to threaten out Abomasnow. And I don't know if it means much, but it's something. Sharpness is a really good ability. And I mean so good that it turned Gallade from pretty mediocre to an actual standout performer in UU, which is the highest it's ever been without needing to equip a Megastone. So, where am I going with this? Well, Veluza also has Sharpness, and it has access to Aqua Cutter, Psycho Cut, and if you're really wanting to hit Ghosts and other Psychics, Night Slash. Access to Choice Scarf can make it immediately threatening with its base 102 attack and base 70 speed now patched up with said Scarf. Choice Band can make it an excellent wall breaker. Or you can do my favorite thing. Say we ball and give it a Citrus Berry, make a defensive Terra, take just enough damage to go above half with the berry, and then use Fillet Away as a powerful late game sweeper once you've managed to do away with those pesky priority abusing revenge killers. This is my favorite set to use because winning with it is a dopamine rush, and it just hits different. Also, I just think it's a cool design for a fish Pokemon, and I like it when they get creative with the fish. You ever look back on a take you made and ultimately decide you were wrong? That's how I feel about Carbink. Carbink isn't bad. Don't get me wrong, it's no Mega Diancie. But me saying that it was the second worst fairy felt insulting to it. In hindsight, actually, yeah, fairy competition is actually very stiff. But I'm willing to take a stand and defend Carbink, because even if it just might be the second worst fully evolved fairy, possibly, it isn't a bad Pokemon. Anything that can get up Trick Room, live a hit with Sturdy, and then set up Stealth Rock before fainting to threaten an opponent, or even set up a Scream to bolster a sweeper's defense, will always find some sort of niche. Carbink happens to be the only Pokemon in all of Scarlet and Violet that has access to Sturdy and Trick Room, which means unlike most Trick Roomers, it can hold a Light Clay. So if you do set up a screen, the sweeper is still going to do plenty fine even when the Trick Room turns run out. And what does it do offensively if the opponent stalls out Trick Room by not attacking Carbink? Well, either you can anticipate that and hard switch to your Guts or Ursaluna and get the Flame or Burn to activate early, or use Body Press on a base 150 defense. So, I know what you're expecting me to say here, but I want to talk about Magneton. Yeah, you heard me right. Magneton. Magnezone showed up in Diamond and Pearl and just stole everything that Magneton was doing from it. There's no justice in this world for poor Magneton. However, there are things that Magneton has over Magnezone that could at least be a little worthwhile. Not only do you have access to Eviolite, which can make you bulkier than Magnezone, but you also have a slightly higher speed. Base 70 on Magneton compared to base 60 on Magnezone, and only 10 less special attack. You don't have to put as much speed investment to outspeed Scizor, Corviknight, Bisharp, or Orthworm, if any. It's a very niche choice compared to old reliable Magnezone, but Magneton itself still has some tricks up its sleeves for those interested in trying to find a use for it. The only thing I don't like is that you can't make use of your potential Eviolite with Body Press. It sadly doesn't get it until it evolves. Base 120 special attack, solid bulk, a low enough speed for Trick Room, and has the coveted pure water typing? Yet, it sadly doesn't see any use alongside the Moonman and Freddy Fazbear. Maybe it wouldn't be tiered so bad if it didn't try to fight with a big meaty claw. You know the one.
Big, meaty claws.
Well, surely Clawitzer's claw isn't just for attracting mates. It is for using Mega Launcher to get a 50% boost to all pulse moves in Aura Sphere. However, I happen to prefer Hydro Miss over Water Pulse because I'll take my chances trying to hit the opponent as hard as I can. Life Orb is really good for letting it use its coverage to make Hydro Pump, Aura Sphere, and Ice Beam lethal moves. Although, one move that I'll always recommend having as the fourth move is U-Turn. This is so that you can pivot out on the last turn of Trick Room, go back to your bulky Trick Roomer, set it back up, and then continue decimating your opponent. And those are my opinions on the underrated Pokemon of each type for Scarlet and Violet. What'd you guys think? Is there a fighting type you can think of that's more underrated than Tauros? Primeape was something I considered, because before Annihilape, it didn't have much going for it. Let me know what you want me to talk about next in the comment section below though.